Okay, I'm just trying to relate sustainability and well-being. I'm not going into the details of what sustainable architecture is or any of those kind of details, uh, not now. But building construction is responsible for using a lot of timber, 25% of the virgin wood, 40% of the raw materials, and buildings consume 16% of the water and 40% of the energy used. And it is emitting the fuel combustion. 70% of the sulfur dioxide is produced by the fuel combustion. So its buildings are very much a part of the climate change and the global warming which we are seeing. There will be some changes in the statistics, what is happening. And also, air pollution is one of the leading risk factors in the human beings. Some people say 3.4 million deaths. Some others say 4.2 million deaths per annum. And if you look at the number of deaths happened due to Corona, it's 6.1 millions in 2 years across the world. So the number of deaths out of air pollution is much more than the number of people who have died of Corona. Why I'm saying it is all these issues of having pure air, which is very, very important for the well-being, pure water, very important for the well-being, and air is very important. Natural light is very, very important for the well-being. So the architecture is responsible, the design is responsible for these things. And without having pure air, pure water, and having enough natural light, which is something which is missing in many of the buildings. The trees are very important. Nature is very important. Human beings cannot separate from nature. And we realized it much more when we were locked up in the Corona lockdown as part of it. This question of sustainability and all these issues came up started getting raised in the 1960s. And 1972, the book came in Limits to Growth, which said we will be having a resource constraint and the coal will be ending by 2040, or steel will get exhausted by this year. Oil will, if by the present trend of use of oil will get exhausted in the coming years. But quite different from the thinking process in the 60s and 70s. What we found after the turn of the century, we find that there is waste disposal is a problem. I mean, you can classify solid waste or liquid waste or any of those. The amount of plastic which is there in oceans, nobody goes and throws, but the amount of waste that we throw is it's getting very big. It's very important to look at an alternate way of living, looking at sustainability in a different way. And we have to think about the kind of plastic that we are generating. And 1/3 of the construction cost, which is solid construction waste, which is cost in most of the cities, is due to construction. It's related with construction waste. And they say over 75% of the waste is recyclable, but we recycle very much smaller fraction of it. We recycle only 30% of it. So we are not recycling the waste. We are generating a lot of waste. This is a photograph from the Chennai, the waste dumping yard. They used to burn the waste, but due to some public outcry, this has stopped. But the waste dumping is still continuing, and still people live based on the waste. So the important thing is to look at the sustainability in a much broader way: economic sustainability, social sustainability. All these things are also equally important along with the environmental sustainability. All these years we have been thinking health is more of a personal issue, but with COVID, it has become a social issue. It's not that we isolate ourselves. We have to look at that earlier the thing was go to good hospitals and follow a good way of living, you will be healthy. But COVID has rewritten all these things, and a new normal has emerged out of these things. Now it is more of a community issue. It has already become a social issue. It is not that we do. Earlier, we can have insurance and protect ourselves, but now it has changed drastically. Looking at the architecture, you see at the beginning of the first half of the last century, asbestos was discovered. And when we discovered asbestos, or when we started using asbestos, most of the people said, now we have solved the housing problem. We have solved the problem of the roofing, because roofing was always a major issue when it comes to affordable housing. And it was called wonderful building material. Many of the people described it because it doesn't have most of the defects, and it's very lightweight, very durable, and not very cost effective, and very fire resistant. So a lot of qualities were there, but asbestos is banned in most of the countries now. What was considered as a wonderful building material is banned, and we have realized the drawbacks of this thing, how it affects the health, because it causes a particular type of cancer or disease called asbestiasis. So to realize this, we have taken 3 or 4 decades, and this is what is happening. So we have to understand the way we live, the way we use building materials. Most of the vernacular building materials which I use have been, I will say, more or less safe. Look at the chlorofluorocarbons. When the air conditioning, it is used in refrigeration, it is used in air conditioning. It's still used in India, but many of the countries are supposed to, developed countries are supposed to phase out in 2020. And so the chlorofluorocarbons is CFC, it is called, is depleting the ozone layer, which protects the earth from ultraviolet radiation. When air conditioning was installed, and when we thought that we have a technology by which everything can be controlled, climate can be artificial, better thermal comfort and climate can be artificially created. But all those thinking processes undergone changes. It has now become very expensive to artificially maintain the indoor climate. So people are now talking about passive forms of thermal comfort, conditioning the buildings. So we never thought that the CFCs will cause a problem. And there are certain materials which has to be used. One of the things I use extensively in buildings, this is a short talk, I'll wind up in 2-3 minutes. It's the thing. Athambudi tiles or the Chettinad tiles doesn't use any firing, no electricity, very energy, handmade product, and the effect or impact it makes on the global warming you can have with different colors, different designs, and all those things. Much better to many of the so-called modern products which comes into the thing. I use extensive timber in my buildings. Timber is the most sustainable building material because it's storing huge amount of carbon. This is a building which we have conserved. And most of these buildings which we conserve are with the timber walls, but we don't use any modern paints or coatings like melamine, which also has its harmful effects. Melamine is, there was a time 20 years ago, melamine plates were extensively used in many of this thing. It has been completely wiped out. So I use extensive timber, but I use wax finishes and some other natural finishes which are there. And one of the other things with the thing which I like about Interwood is that most of the plywoods which are manufactured in India has formaldehyde. And when the MD Mr. Hardeep was speaking, he said they are trying to stick to the emission standards. And formaldehyde emission standards for USA is very strict. But in India, many of these standards are not met. And many of the plywoods that we get has formaldehyde, which is one of the VOCs, volatile organic compounds. And it is, I mean, the recent research by various organizations, World Health Organization, found that it is causing health hazards. So we have to think about using these materials. But there are plywoods which are available with very low emission standards or within strict limits of the health standards. But the way the architecture is going, where the way design is going, we don't look at a healthy living. We are living with all these coatings and materials and some of these things. And it's time that we look into the healthy living conditions. Thank you.
My name is Hadip Sani. I'm the founder of Interwood brand. We have been manufacturing and retailing modular kitchens and wardrobes for a quality-seeking customer for more than 30 years. We use a German recipe for our manufacturing, which makes our kitchens and wardrobes antimicrobial and compliant to even emission norms, which means every Interwood kitchen and wardrobe stands the test of human safety and well-being. A feature extremely important in these times and something we cherish as our brand core ideal. With a brand presence in more than 12 cities, we are recipients of quality certificates in environment safety and highest standards of production. Within 30 years and counting, we are ready to take the next leap of growth in fulfilling aspiration of designer fraternity.
Interwood as a brand started manufacturing kitchens and wardrobes some 30 years ago, as you all know, with a recipe that was truly German, with human well-being at its core ideal. Now, since then, we've kind of come a long way where we have worked with more than 1,500 architects across the country in helping them morph their vision into reality. So today at this milestone of our business, we thought, what could we give back to the design fraternity, which has so amazingly blessed us with their patronage, their love, and their support. So we thought that we also understand that, architects and interior designers are catalysts of social change. Just what we saw when Dr. Kuriakose was speaking. They single-handedly can morph urban landscapes. They can bring about a cultural innovation, and they can also ignite a wellness movement through a meaningful design dialogue. So we thought it would be only appropriate to give back to the architect and design community a gift of 3 R's. Yes, 3 R's. So the first R stands for recognition. By having a WAP model, recognize this amazing design talent pool that we have in our country. We want to kind of give space and visibility and space to all the design fraternity on our newsletter, which will be disseminated to more than 15,000 premium homeowners across the country every year. The second R stands for reward. Yes, a reward. Through this WAP community, we also understand that we want to reward this fraternity by being able to promote their wonderful work through our social media initiatives, through our market outreach programs, which will be constantly disseminated through knowledge sharing platforms such as these webinars for the benefit of all. And third is revenue. Yes, we also, by scouting for meaningful projects, for relevant and meaningful projects for our architects, we at Team Interwood would strive to help our design fraternity increase the revenue growth. And ladies and gentlemen, all with the overarching umbrella of respect. That is our value-added partnership. So without much further delay, I invite all the participants from the design fraternity attending this webinar to be a part of this amazing value-added partnership